Hello everybody, thank you to the SRFC for hosting this and inviting me along to do my first public reading, which ironically isn't in public, it's in my own kitchen. I hope everyone's coping well, doing alright, keeping yourselves entertained and doing what I'm doing by generating entertainment out of random crap we have lying around the house. What have I done? Other than, I've recently finished my degree, yay for me, finished that yesterday. So I've been busy with that up to now, but other than that, I'm guessing if you're on here, you like reading, which is one of the things I've tried to do, although that takes a bit of a serious hit when I've been studying, as does my writing. So I'm excited to jump into those things again. But yes, it's reading. We've been watching lots of fun things and exciting things on the TV. My partner, who's a big board gamist, she ran upstairs the other day and grabbed a load of dice out of different boxes and came down to teach me how to play Yahtzee once I told her that I'd never played it. So we played that. It is currently 1-1 if anyone's keeping score, and we're holding off on that third deciding game because here in the UK at least the government has said we've got another 3 weeks of lockdown, so we don't want to peak too soon. With that, so we're trying to spread the entertainment, and I guess if the message there is Yahtzee responsibly. What am I reading at the minute? At the minute, I'm reading a book by. It's not out yet. I'm test reading for a good friend, John Gwynn, the author of The Faithful and the Fallen, the Malice series. Malice is book 1, and then he had A Time of Dread, A Time of Blood, and A Time of Courage, which has just come out. A Time of Courage, you need to buy that. They're an amazing, some of the best books I've ever read. So I'm reading his newest work and getting back to him with some feedback. So that's really exciting. After that, I am going to I'm trying to get my hands on a copy of The Silver Tide by Jen Williams, because I love Jen Williams books, and I love the first two in the series, in the Copycat trilogy. And I can't find a paperback copy for love nor money. So if you know of anywhere that's got one, please tell me so I can buy it. If not, I'm going to have to go down the ebook route, I think. Other than that, it's what else have I been doing? Not a great deal, other than trying to make the most of the sunshine by taking the dogs out for a walk, we're growing our own seeds and vegetables and things like that. We're becoming sort of random weird country farmer people in a really tiny house. Well, not tiny house, but we certainly ain't got a farm. Anyway, a bit about me. I am Kareem Mafouz. I'm a writer represented by John Jarrold. A great guy, amazing guy, and if you are looking for representation, you should definitely consider him if you are writing fantasy, science fiction or horror. And if you ever want to ask him any questions, he hosts regular AMAs on Twitter, where he will say, basically the premise is ask him anything you like about publishing, getting an agent, any stage of publishing, and he's been in the game quite a long time, and he can usually give you a fairly comprehensive answer quite quickly. Definitely take advantage of that. What I'm going to read for you today is the first chapter in a book of mine that isn't out, working on it, called Death's Wake. The premise is it's about the USP even is about a group of people within the population that are called survivors, and when they die, they come back to life forever immune to whatever killed them the first time. So if they're burnt alive, they come back immune to fire. Fire doesn't bother them. Which was sort of born out of my love of all things geeky. So that is probably less about fantasy and more about Marvel and growing up loving X-Men with all their mutant power. Did I say X-Men's then? X-Men. All the various different funky powers that they've got and what have you, and I suppose it sort of came from there, and then I've mixed that in with my love of epic fantasy. And in this world, these people are seen as unnatural, which is predictable, I guess, and they are hunted. It is very much for the reader to decide who the good guys and bad guys are, and hopefully, if it finds bookshelves one day, you'll be able to decide that for yourself. We pulled it from submission actually because we had some really good feedback from someone I hold in extremely high regard, and me and my agent, so me and John, decided I'd rework it a little bit. So the future for this book is uncertain, but I will certainly do all I can to improve it, and we'll see. If the time is right, the time is right. If it's not, it's not. Another project I'm working on, which I'm 50,000 words into at the minute, is a post-apocalyptic book set in London. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that. I started writing it a year ago, in between my university modules, because for my second year creative writing exam, I did it was all based on post-apocalyptic work. So I read all these cool books like The Stand, The Road by Cormac McCarthy. The Stand was obviously Stephen King, and then Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. I read World War Z. I read all these cool post-apocalyptic books, so that's why I wrote that. And the premise behind that was sort of like how we treat in the world, and rather than a virus. So yeah, I just don't know whether the world wants to, having been cooped up inside for so long, whether there'll be a market for post-apocalyptic fiction. Anyway, I'll certainly finish it because I'm loving writing it. And we'll see what the future holds. But anyway, now that I am free to write and my degree is over, I will just start writing and see where I go. One thing is certain, I won't stop writing. But anyway, I will read from Death's Wake now. Hopefully you'll find it enjoyable. And yeah, here we go. So 3, 8 and 4, year 962 of the Age of Balance, winter. Brant ran for his life. He followed the narrow, winding track through the dark wood more from memory than sight. Rain poured through the canopy, dripping cold in his eyes, making it even harder to see. Why him, Brant thought. Why me? Why now? He couldn't hear the Guardian chasing him, but then he couldn't hear anything but his own panting and the thwacking splats of his feet. His only reason to hope was that the deep leaf mould on the path was giving way to packed earth. The Monton stables were close. He ran faster, arms up to protect his face from whipping branches. The trees mercifully thinned, and then he was free, lurching as one booted foot slid on the muddy farm track. He staggered, his heartbeat pulsing in his ears, and turned to face the forest. Someone was crashing through the trees towards him. Shit! Brant turned and set a fear-driven pace up the hill, risking a glance back to see a silhouette burst out of the tree line. The Guardian barely missed a step as he hit the path and arrowed after him. A jolt of fear pushed more speed into Brant's leaden legs, his blood on fire with it, and in his panic he slipped and went down hard on one knee. The pain would be blinding if he lived, but he was damned if he could feel anything now. He was back on his feet, charging up the hill for all he was worth. Almost there. Run, you bastard! He could see the barn now, one huge door slightly ajar. Kate! He choked on his own breath. Caver! He heard the threatening bark of an offended flockhound, and a great wolf-like dog shot out of the gloom and tackled him to the floor. Even in the weak moonlight, Brant could see the gleaming teeth as the dog's muzzle darted towards his face. He pushed it away and rolled to his feet, one hand firmly on Caver's collar as the big tongue swiped down at his face. Brant had hated his short stint at the stable kennels, but it had paid well enough, and now it might save his life. Brant! The Guardian yelled, close now. Too close, and at the sound, Caver went to full alert, barking and growling and straining against Brant's hold. The Guardian stood across the way, the black leathers of his trade as distinctive as the Royal Guard's bright scale armour. He had dark, shoulder-length hair, though in the rain he might be as blonde as the Volgar raiders. The point was, he was a Guardian with shoulder-length hair, and Brant had seen him ride into Monton on a massive black horse. You're him, aren't you? You're the Black Death! Brant yelled over Caver's barrage. What folk call me is their own business, he said. The wind picked up, throwing waves of rain sideways with each gust. Brant flinched and squinted against it, but the Guardian could have been carved from stone. I'm not one of them, Brant said, wincing as his knee flared up. I'm not a survivor. Then why run? Caver lunged, barking thunder into the rain. Brant was afraid even on the right side of the beast. He felt the flockhound bunch his muscles and surge forwards. Brant had to plant his foot down in front, and pain exploded in his knee. Because, he grunted, your kind cut first and ask questions later, and I don't fancy dying on account of you mistaking me for someone I ain't. It was hard to hear over the wind and Caver's growls, but the Guardian was laughing. What's so funny? Brant snapped. All your rotten brethren give me the same speech before I kill them. Well, I'm telling the truth, you murderous shit, Brant shouted at him, hobbling back towards the barn doors and dragging the mad hound with him. The Guardian strode forward, only halting as Caver's ferocity doubled, the flockhound nearly pulling Brant over. Wouldn't move if I were you. All this rain is making his collar awful slippery. Brant, tonight you die. If it means I have to kill that dog and 10 more like it to get to you, then so be it. But I promise, if you make my job difficult, you'll wish you died properly the first time around. Brant's back struck the barn doors. He shuffled along to the opening, his knackered knee making it near bloody impossible to restrain the enraged flockhound. Yeah, Brant called. Good luck with that. He let Caver loose, hearing the dog snarl as he attacked, and ran through the musty, dark barn for the paddocks behind it, where his hopes of an easy escape were crushed. The horses had all been stabled. Caver's ferocious snarling became a high-pitched yelp. Fuck! Brant pressed a hand against his knee and lurched on towards the river. It wasn't far. He limped and staggered and glanced back, kept glancing back, but he saw nothing, no one. He slowed when he saw the moon reflected on the polished surface of the river, taking a long, calming breath, and screamed. The back of his leg, his good leg, lit with pain, and he stumbled and fell. He twisted in the mud, a knife buried in his thigh. The Guardian strode towards him, unhurried, as Brant wrapped his hand around the knife handle and shrieked. He braced, took several quick breaths and tore it free. The pain had him teetering towards unconsciousness, but the Guardian was coming, and he was bringing death with him. Brant scrabbled back on his arse, fought to rise, wept as he balanced his full weight on his tortured knee and slapped a hand over the bleeding gash in his leg. Come on then, he spat, putting some venom in his voice and pretending it was courage. He snapped the blade out at the Guardian, who swayed back, then punched him hard on the nose. Just another day's work. Brant went cross-eyed with the pain and slashed the knife in a blind, desperate swing, tears flooding down his cheeks. How the fuck was he supposed to best a Guardian in combat? The Guardian caught his wrist, businesslike, and held it in a painful stretch. Dropped the knife. He let the blade fall, and the Guardian casually wrenched his arm upwards, the elbow bending inward with a sickening crunch. He collapsed and screamed as he tried to break his fall with his injured limb. I dropped the fucking knife, he screamed into the rain, head swimming like he'd drunk his weight in spirit. And I ain't no bloody survivor. You're Brant Tech, the Guardian said, a survivor with 13 murders to your name. I'm not! I'm human! Same as you! I swear to God! The Guardian stood over him, and Brant fancied he saw the smallest flicker of doubt in his stare. He knelt down and grabbed his shirt as Brant recoiled. We'll see, the Guardian said. He was dragged away, begging and pleading for the Guardian to believe him, only for his words to be cut off as he was thrown into the river. Cold water soaked straight through his clothes, and then the Guardian planted a foot on his chest and forced Brant beneath the surface, pinning him to the riverbed. For the first time since he'd laid eyes on the Guardian, Brant felt a measure of calm. Everything was calmer underwater, quieter, more peaceful. But Brant was no fool. He knew what the Guardian was doing. Brant had to do something, and quick. If he didn't, the Guardian would kill him. He couldn't get free, but perhaps he still had one option. Pretending to drown. He thrashed in the water, struggling as convincingly as he could, then blew hard, sending a plume of bubbles racing to the surface, followed by weaker attempts to free himself before he took a long breath in and hoped the Guardian would think him dead. The water he breathed in filtered back out of his lungs and porous skin as he finally went limp. The Guardian held him down a while longer to be sure. Then, as hope blossomed in Brant's chest, he removed his boot. He'd done it. He'd hoped a current would gently carry him away, but after a moment recalled how still the river had been. Not keen to linger, he gently started to propel himself into deeper water when the Guardian stood on his broken arm. Brant screamed, and this time there was nothing feigned about it, sending forth another stream of bubbles which became a gasping groan as he was hauled from the water and thrown onto the bank. He lay there coughing, bleeding, exposed. He'd always known it would happen, that his luck would run out one day. He just thought he'd have more time. Despite it all, he started laughing. In for a copper, in for a crown, he supposed. 13, he spluttered through his laughter. Fuck the Guardian. If he'd been caught, his full achievements would be known. The Guardian glared at him as Brandt raised his head and spat. It was 15, you simple shit. The Guardian's fingers curled into clenched fists. 3 fishermen, Brandt said. That's how it started. After I drowned. Then, while their hubbies were away, some lonely wife's got it, if you know what I mean. Brandt savoured the Guardian's revulsion. Some of them had little ones too. But you're a killer, eh? Just like me. So you get it. Wouldn't do to have loose ends now, would it? If I had, you Guardians might have actually turned up in time to save one of the worthless runts. The Guardian's features relaxed, as if a storm had been swept away and replaced with blue sky in one gust of wind. He lowered himself to the ground, not angry or hurt or any other bastard thing, when Brandt needed to hurt him. If this was to be his end, and it seemed it was, he wanted to haunt the Guardian's nightmares for the rest of his miserable life. But the man stared at Brandt like he was nothing. Before you loosed the dog on me, I made you a promise, the Guardian said in the intimate way of a physician talking to a terminal patient. About your second death, do you remember? Brandt did. His fleeting bravado was gone, and his whole body trembled. The Guardian took up the knife The Guardian took up the knife that had very recently been inside Brandt's leg and held it up so Brandt could see. Dirt speckled the blood-smeared steel, and Brandt followed its razor point as best he could, until it came to rest above his Adam's apple. The Guardian held it there, his gaze boring into Brandt. I always keep my promises, he said. Brandt opened his mouth to protest and choked as the knife plunged down. He screamed, but it came out a gargling hiss. He thrashed as sticky warmth spread down his neck as his hold on life grew weaker and weaker as the Guardian worked that knife ever deeper into his neck. Cole sat alone in a wide, albeit sparsely lit corridor deep within the West Orphanage vaults. He absently rubbed at dried blood in the creases of his hands while his mind was busy. Brandt had plagued the West Territory for 3 years, stealing and raping and murdering unchecked. How had he earned that mercifully quick death? What justice was there in it for those Brandt had killed, or their poor families? A quick death was no recompense to a family struggling on in death's wake, as Cole well knew. Nothing was, and by God, Cole would not let survivors, those craven pieces of unnatural shit, try to hide behind the very laws that their existence breached. If that meant he had to endure a lengthy inquiry after every retrieval, then so be it. He had put another survivor down. The world was better for it. He had nothing to be ashamed of. He could hear raised voices on the other side of the iron-banded door. The full council had convened for this one, and in Cole's experience, more opinions meant a harsher punishment. He barely had chance to get comfy when the noise level died down and eventually stopped. That couldn't be good. It usually took the council an age to decide anything. He took a breath and reminded himself that his temper never helped him in these situations. It opened and Azra, Cole's mentor and master guardian, emerged. He was nicknamed the Old Bull, which didn't take much deciphering. Only bulls don't have a sackload of grey beard with specks of black too stubborn to silver, nor do they carry a great twin-bladed axe on their backs. Cole remained on the stone bench while Azra frowned at him, no doubt wondering if Cole was worth the headache. Tell me true, lad. Was it necessary? Cole gave a single nod. He didn't need to say anything, not to Azra at least, and his mentor drew in a long breath and exhaled quickly, a habit of his that preceded every decision he'd ever made. In you come then, lad. Let's be about it. The council stood around the table that held Brandt's broken body, arrayed in as natural a pose as possible. He looked pretty normal if you ignored the arm bent the wrong way and the jagged gash carved into his neck. Even Cole had to admit this one looked bad, but he forced himself to meet everyone's eyes. Mistress Muriel, Priestess Cassia, Master Nor, and finally Overseer Kelvin. Azra, though a member of the council, remained at Cole's side. Nor tells me this man's Adam's apple was called out. Like an apple, Kelvin said. Cole thought there was a joke in that somewhere, but he was damned if he was going to look for it. The overseer waited for a reply, even if he hadn't technically asked a question. Perhaps you would like to explain the broken arm, or the stab wound to this man's hamstring? Overseer, you read the retrieval sheet, and I believe the lad. This Brandt deserved what he got. Azra, Kelvin interrupted. holding up a hand. "You've already stated your opinion, as have we all. Now I am passing judgment." "Overseer," Azra said. Kelvin gestured to the ruin of Brant's throat. "There are some on the council who believe your methods are excessive. I am one of them. So Cole, can you prove this was necessary and not merely a vengeful outlet for your own grief?" Cole had seen his home burn. He had heard the screams, seen the survivor responsible, but he forced those thoughts away. He needed to keep a level head and looked at Brant again, objectively, remembering what the man had done and what he had said at the end. He acknowledged the council's opinion and balanced his actions against it, against Brant's trickery and his pride in killing. Eventually he met the overseer's stare and said, 3, 8, and 4. "I'm sorry," Kelvin replied. 3 men, 8 women, and 4 children lie dead because of the scum before you. They were all decent, innocent people. He paused, wondering how each of those 15 had felt in their last moments as Brant killed them. "In the afterlife," he said, "if there is such a thing, I will ask his victims if I was excessive." And there you go. That's the first chapter of Death's Wake. Cheery, isn't it? So the overriding theme of the entire book is about people dealing and coping with grief and how that affects different characters. I thought that was a really interesting study. So there are many different characters in this book and they all deal with it slightly different ways, and I think that makes for quite an exciting cast of characters, I suppose. But yeah, thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it, and when this is all over, I hope I see many of you at the SRFC. And yeah, and I look forward to seeing more videos. Please make sure you subscribe, and yeah, in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and yeah, look after yourself.